Hello, leaders of the world. Welcome to Spread Love in Organizations, a podcast for purpose-driven healthcare leaders striving to make life better around the world by leading their teams with genuine care, servant leadership, and love. I'm Naji, your host, having the pleasure to be joined today by Melanie Ivarsson, Chief Development Officer at Moderna. In this role, Melanie leads the Clinical Development Operations Department and delivers with her team all clinical programs within the Moderna portfolio. Prior to joining them, she was head of global clinical operations at Takeda and spent 9 years at Pfizer in clinical development. Melanie also held roles within the early clinical development group at Eli Lilly. After receiving her PhD from the University of Bristol, she completed postdoctoral research at London University and New York University. Melanie also holds an executive MBA from MIT Sloan School of Management. Mel, it's such a pleasure to see you again and a great honor to have you with me today.
Thank you so much. It's great to chat to you. The honor's all mine.
I would love to hear first your personal story, what brought you to pharma in the very first place, and really joining a month, I think, before the pandemic was declared, one of the companies that helped humanity be out of this pandemic with vaccines. What's in between the line of your incredible, inspiring journey?
Absolutely. So as you nicely summarized at the beginning there, I started off in academia as a neuroscientist and did a couple of postdocs. And I really enjoyed how that helped my brain be trained to think, to deeply analyze problems. That was an amazing training for me. I'm a systems neurophysiologist by training. So I'm thinking big connections, big picture. And that actually is really the arc of my entire career. It's the building, the big picture, how things connect together is what really fascinates me. So during my academic career, I realized sitting in a lab at 2 o'clock in the morning that I actually didn't have any interesting questions to ask about that were narrow, that I wanted to ask the big questions. And that made me start to think that maybe research grants and very focused academic work in that discipline wasn't the right place for me to be. And so I started my career at Lilly in their clinical pharmacology department and spent 20 years moving through very large pharma company where you get to talk about very big problems, big organizations that are connected together in lots of sort of different ways, and you get to ask those big questions. And I went all the way through Lilly, then Pfizer for nearly a decade, Shire, which then got acquired by Takeda. And in the last couple of years of my time in the sort of Shire Takeda era, I was also doing my executive MBA at MIT in parallel. And that really gave me a different way of looking at some of these big picture problems, how to build organizations, organizational processes, strategy, how to put teams together. And it was at that time that I thought to myself, I could go and, approach this differently. These learnings, let's don't go and do something different. And Moderna reached out to me looking for a new chief development officer. It was a newly created position. At the time, clinical development had 30 people in it, and they hadn't even done a large-scale clinical trial. And they wanted somebody who could come and build their organization slowly over a couple of years, a nice, slow build. And I thought, well, I'm never going to get an opportunity like this. Go and build it the way I want to, slowly, over time, thoughtfully, carefully, build out an organization that can deliver its first sort of phase 3 study in 18 months from now. Well, as history shows, that isn't quite what happened. I turned up on the 3rd of February as we all were about to get sent home as the pandemic was being declared. And the week Moderna decided that they were going to go and develop a COVID-19 vaccine. And so my nice, gentle build literally had to take place in days and weeks rather than the years that I thought. And the rest is history. We went off and developed our COVID-19 vaccine in partnership with the government and many others that enabled that. And it was an incredible experience. Not what I was expecting, but just an incredible experience. And I learned so much about leadership and building teams. And now where we are today, we're at again yet another inflection point. So an amazing leadership journey.
Well, thank you so much for sharing it, and I'm gonna go and dig into this a little bit more from a leadership standpoint and your learning. So you obviously led team, as you said, like you thought you had 18 months to build and scale up and growth, but actually you did it in a couple of months in a crisis mode where not only an internal like the word was obviously anxiously waiting for you to bring us hope, and you did it. So, what is the key leadership learning you took with you from this experience?
So it is all about the people and how they make decisions together in that moment of in that moment. I think what I learned is that I absolutely did not need to be the smartest person in the room, but I needed to enable everyone else to talk to each other and make the right decisions and move things forward and put things in place, have the right conversation. And that's a time when a leader has to actually lead from behind, or take a step back and look at the full extent of the problem ahead of them. So I'd never developed a vaccine before. That was not my expertise. It wasn't a case of me turning up in Moderna and going, this is the way to do this. There were many better people who had all the right expertise. We asked them to come on the journey with us. And through our own team, we had an incredible, very small, nimble team, that this was their reason for being. This was the public health crisis that they hoped they would never have to live through. But for all people who develop vaccines, this is what they're actually trained to do, that one day a rapid vaccine response is going to be needed by the world. And this incredible team of people came together to do this. And my job was to not get in their way, get out of their way, enable them as much as possible, get them what they needed, open doors for them, wipe away their tears, be there for them late at night, early in the morning, and help get them up this incredible hill that we had to climb up together. And that took many different forms, from going into really quite controversial and difficult conversations in the early days, trying to work out who was going to do what and how, thinking through, can we do this, to sending, when everybody had to work through the weekend, sending everybody, a nice food package so that they could just put things in the oven and not have to worry. It takes many, many forms to keep a team going through all those different times. And my job was to just enable and not be in the way.
I love it. Like you said it several times, enabling others and not getting in the way to do it. And as you said, there was this, I love how you framed it, right? Like there was this big purpose that is so important and everyone was waiting for it. Would you have a story or an example? Because you shared some of those. And I think in those moments of crisis, you always have ups and downs. Like there is this big purpose, but there's also sometimes negative news that you get, and you have to help the team go through it and keep on going. Like, do you have stories and examples on how you lead teams specifically in those highs and valleys that they go through emotionally also in development? Any example on how you've done this for them to keep having the faith to get to the result?
Yeah, and I think it's one of the greatest challenges for all of us during the pandemic was leading when you couldn't be in the room together. So there is particularly in a small biotech, there's a lot to be said for just getting in a room. The leadership at Moderna historically had been very in person. And so they walked the corridors. I turned up at the beginning of February and we all got sent home within 6 weeks. So most of us had never met each other. I had to hire a team almost entirely remotely. We all did. And that team needed to find a way to get to know each other virtually. You build a lot of trust through that sort of personal connection, being in a room with somebody, shaking their hand, taking a few moments to sort of have the kind of conversation that helps you build stronger professional connections. That is incredibly difficult over a Zoom call. And that's also very difficult when time is of the essence. not only did we have to do that within ourselves, but we also were under Operation Warp Speed. We were working with government partners. We were working with a network of investigators that we'd never worked with. Everybody had heard the call to action. Everybody was there, incredibly well-intended, wanting to do the right thing. And you had this bringing together of private-public partnership, the government, the NIH, academic trialists, this little tiny biotech that had never done this before, that had this technology that was full of hope. And then we also had to partner with other companies that were in the race as well. We all had to get out of each other's way. The collaboration there was extraordinary. So, everybody was so well intended, but there were days when you just had to remember that because, everybody was used to doing things a certain way. And so you bring all those people together, you can't get them in a room. You've just got to kind of cut through it. We threw time at it. Time was our most important resource. And so we made enormous amounts of time for each other. Our friends and families really suffered during this period, but it was the most extraordinary experience of all our careers. So if you needed to be on the phone at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning to have the right conversation with someone, you did that. And so making enormous amounts of time for each other. And also carving out times in the day where you'd say between 6 and 8, go be with your families, have dinner, take some time away. Let's all get back in here at 8 o'clock tonight. We have to rest as well. And so finding that balance of being there for everybody, asking them to do this exceptional thing, and then trying to preserve some sense of sort of wellness and rest, and making sure that people were actually able to sort of physically and mentally cope, was really, really essential. And as a leader, you're going through it yourself, and you can only see people from the shoulders up, right? You can't see how they're really sitting. You've got to become this incredible good reader of those little small signals. And after a while, I started to feel that I could read people through their emotions, through the Hollywood squares on the screen in front of me, and became very good at detecting that face of that individual, that they're not where they need to be right now. And a quick follow-up call, everything okay? How are you feeling? What's going on? So emotional intelligence had to become a finely honed skill in a completely different medium. And so I would say for leaders, nothing prepares you for that kind of experience. But we all became very good at doing it, I think.
As you were talking, obviously what you've done, what other pharma companies stood up for the occasion and did, was something we all hoped for, right? Like you talked about this multi-stakeholder partnership and speed to get to a solution in unprecedented time. And obviously this is what we all hope for doing all the time, right? But obviously you cannot operate as we operated during COVID and like relentless hours, etc. But at the same time, there's other people who still are waiting for better treatments in all different diseases. So I'm wondering, what are the key learning that you're taking with you that we can implement at healthcare leaders in a more normalcy world, but where obviously speed and impatience for patients is still so important?
It's such a good question, and one that we're all grappling with as an industry now. So what made COVID such an exceptional time for our industry is that the entire ecosystem became focused on one thing. So companies themselves didn't compete with each other. We knew that we had to make enough doses between us of successful vaccines for the world. So we became united in that mission. Regulators, ethics committees, clinical trial sites, suppliers, CROs, vendors, labs, everybody were prepared to prioritize the vaccine and therapeutics work above all else. And I think that is the reality, is how much of that machine it took to deliver on really what ended up being just a few successful vaccines, and a few successful therapeutics at the end of the day. So when you then try to, bring that out into something like cancer or Alzheimer's, what it would take to deliver the same focus, that becomes incredibly challenging to do. What I hope it also does, though, is helps companies recognize what parts of their process they don't actually need. It's very easy to believe that you need to go through a number of steps to get somewhere, and it takes 6 weeks, when at a time like that you can do it in a day if you can get the right people around the table, the virtual table in our case, to do it. And so I think Moderna had never created any of these processes, so we were creating them as we went along for this development program. And now that we're scaling up to doing so much more work, we are trying to recognize what got us there and what we can scale. Where do we need to create more process, and where do we just always want to be this nimble? So strategic decision making is an example of somewhere where you really want to be very crisp and nimble. You don't want to have teams having to wait weeks and months to go to governance and have to go and do all those pre-meetings and navigate all of the different opinions before they go into the room. You've got to decide, what's your culture going to be of decision making? How are decisions going to be made? Are you then prepared to operationalize and execute on those decisions with great speed? And how quickly can you do that? And sort of hold on to the core of that incredibly nimble pandemic strategic and execution capability that we developed. And I think I remember talking to one of my peers who was working for a much larger company, one of the big giants that was in the vaccine development space with us. And I was talking about the need to get something approved and having to sort of hunt down 2 people to do it. And she said, well, I have to get it through about 600, right? And that's the difference. I know she was being, a little sarcastic probably in her comment, but I think she was trying to say the point that everybody wants to have an opinion, and then that's when you start to realize how important it is how you structure your organization and the processes you put into it. And when you start to feel that things are really slowing down because you need to go and gain yet another opinion on something, then you probably need to kind of sit back and go, okay, if we got this right, because we didn't need all of that last time, and what's changed.
I love it. It's reminding me about Organization Lab and, all the design work we need to go through. It's now that your adrenaline cutoff is going down, how are you making sure that your team, and how can we make sure as leaders that our team constantly think of the purpose and why we do what we do after the adrenaline rush?
Yeah, again, another fabulous question. One of the things that we grapple with here all the time is how do you pull that culture through an organization, and how do you do that when you scaled so quickly? So I've, in the last 3 years, have done a 20x build. So I started with 30 people. My organization's now about 600, and it will grow again, maybe nearly double again within the next year. That's an extraordinary build, because actually I've gone from knowing everybody's name and knowing them reasonably well to not. And that's difficult for any leader. And so you need to disseminate out the culture and what's important and be visible and contactable. We hired a lot of people in the pandemic wherever they were. And so we can't even just bring everybody back into the office. I think the whole industry has grappled with virtual ways of working. So we've created, hopefully, an environment that is much better for people's own wellness, lifestyle, work-life balance, because they can work where they're at and they can fit in other important things in their lives much more easily. But at the same time, the cultural core of an organization and that purpose of what's important becomes very dispersed in that. So we created at Moderna, something called the Moderna mindset. And these are 12 mindsets that cover many of the ways we think about things, it's, we pursue options in parallel. We pivot fearlessly in the face of new data. We obsess over learning. These are just examples of some of them. And they're our way of speaking to each other in our own language, to make sure that we're asking each other the right questions, we're challenging each other the right way. They're sort of part of our cultural core. And that really helps us move programs, move our work forward together, because we have a very strong culture that everyone's bought into. And it allows us, I think, to have the right conversations. We're always learning, and as we evolve and grow, we'll probably think differently about this and evolve and grow. But for now, those mindsets, that understanding of how you show up together every day and bring people together, has been an incredibly strong and effective mechanism for us, I think.
So I would love to give you now a word, and I'm looking for a reaction to it. So the first one is leadership.
Leadership is for everyone, right? Leadership, everybody in an organization has the opportunity to demonstrate leadership. But I'm going to react with a word that may surprise you, and that is kind. I strongly believe that leadership can be kind, and there is nothing wrong with leadership taking the full picture into account. And so I'm going to react with the word kind.
I love it. It's all my podcast with the mission of spreading love and leadership. So I totally buy kind. The second word is impact.
You want me to react with one word or a sentence?
You can do a sentence.
So I think, again, impact is can mean very, very different things to different people. We had the opportunity to have enormous impact on the world. Not everybody gets an opportunity to be part of something like that, and it will define them. I see that in my team and my colleagues and the people around me, that experience defines them to a certain extent now, and something they're rightly incredibly proud of. But impact can be something very different. And for me now, it's about enabling others to be the best that they can be. So the impact I would love to leave is my impact on others, to amplify what we've done and what we believe in, and to go on and do amazing things. And that's part of the legacy. So if by working with me, my impact on them is something around the way we've done things together and made decisions, and the joy they've taken from that, and they carry that forward, I would be very happy.
What about health equity?
Oh, that's an incredibly important topic, and one that we all became so aware of during the pandemic. Not only the disproportionate impact of COVID itself on people from different backgrounds, but then access. And so health equity is something that we built into the way we have done things. So, people are possibly aware that we actually made the very difficult decision halfway through our clinical trial to actually slow down enrollment of the white population, because we actually had a largely white number of clinical trialists. And so we actually stopped enrolling white people into our clinical trial in order to give access to people from different communities the information to make an informed decision about whether to enroll in the trial. We thought that was an incredibly important thing to do, and it allowed us to go out and build relationships with the different communities. And we built a diversity and inclusion board with a number of health equity experts. And that was probably one of the most important and informative things for me personally that we did. This was something that, like the rest of the industry, I knew was important, but had done very little about personally. And now it has become incredibly important to us. And so we now move forward with all our development programs with this in mind. And that is very, very important, that you not only, health equity starts with the way you study a new vaccine or treatment. 20 years ago, we talked about the fact that we didn't have women in clinical trials, right? Everything was just studied in healthy, young, mostly white men. And that then meant that all prescribing information and access actually was only fit for purpose for one small part of the population. In order to make sure that there is access for all and equity for all, we've actually got to start by asking the right questions for all of mankind. And that starts with the basic clinical research. And this topic I'm very passionate about getting right.
The last word is spread love in organizations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think people give their hearts and souls to their place of work. People in healthcare are just the most incredibly dedicated, passionate, and committed people in the industry, and unbelievably altruistic in the way they will put the project they're working on above all else for them. So I think we should thank them by making sure that we know that we want them to look after themselves. Wellness is incredibly important, and we strive always to make sure that people take care of themselves first. And it's something I always say to people. I do a new hire coffee connect once a month for all the new starters into the organization, and I go, put yourself first, work out what it is that you love and who you love, and put them at the top of your list every day, because nobody should be sacrificing what they love for this place. One of the little anecdotes I would share with you is we offered some clinical trialists a token of appreciation, and they could either exchange it for something for themselves, or they could exchange it for a charitable donation. It was extraordinary, the incredibly high number of people who'd not only gone into a clinical trial and dedicated their time and effort to the advancement of science, but then when offered the opportunity to sort of take a token of appreciation, chose to then even give that to charity. I thought that was remarkably interesting about true altruism and how it sort of works in healthcare.
Any final word of wisdom, Mel, for healthcare leaders around the world?
I think we are so blessed to have the opportunity to work in the sector of the industry that we do. Hang on to your true self through all of this. I'm not ashamed to talk about the fact that as a leader, I believe kindness is incredibly important. That's who I am. Don't try and be somebody else. Don't try and emulate a leader that you see somewhere else and think I need to be like them. Be yourself. Whatever is important to you, show up every day. Be principled. Bring yourself to work. Care about the people in your organization. Enable them the best you can. Get out of their way. That's something I spend a lot of time trying to do. And enjoy it. It's a real privilege. It's a real privilege. And one day you'll be sitting on a plane next to somebody who's had their life changed because of something you worked on or developed. In our case with the vaccine, it happens a lot. It's incredibly rewarding. But yeah, just look after yourself and look after each other.
Wow. Well, what an amazing way to sum up this discussion. Thank you so much, Mel, for being with me today and this incredible chat. Thank you.
That was wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening to Spread Love in Organizations podcast. Subscribe and connect with us on SpreadLoveIO.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Most importantly, Spread love in your organizations and spread the word around you to inspire others and amplify this movement our world so desperately needs.